Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Get a little pull in there in that little Paul Feinbaum twang there, Tammy. Thanks,
Tom,
thanks for having me on the show.
Tom. Shout out to Legend Bay, and all of the other great callers there on that show. We are back with some concerns. The concerns today, no, not some random tree on some random corner. We're talking defensive tackles today, Tom. And I've got some concerns about the Ohio State defensive tackles. And the first one here is let's talk about the nose tackles and specifically talking about Will Smith Jr. and John Walker and the step down. I'll say it from Kayden McDonald. I don't think that's a slight on those guys to say it's going to be a step down. I think how far that step is, and is the step so far that James Smith has to step in, so to speak, to say step one more time. But the I wonder, this is a step up for John Walker. It's a step forward for Will Smith, and I just wonder if there's enough there. And kind of like when we talked about with the defensive ends, are they just guys? And I think we've seen Will Smith have some really solid moments. I think he's still waiting for his first tackle for loss, though. And so, like that, those are some things that I'm just wondering how impactful and disruptive can the nose tackles be this year? Because it's not going to be what they were last year.
No, it is definitely not going to be what it was last year. And Kayden McDonald really was someone who really set a benchmark for what it could be to be a nose tackle at Ohio State. And I feel like this is a little bit like when we're having the Caleb Downs
Mhm.
conversation, where it's like, well, the safety play should be pretty good this year. It's not going to be as good as it was last year. And the linebacker play this year, you're probably not going to have two guys who are top 10 NFL draft picks at linebacker this year. There are going to be spots where you're going to see a little bit of a step back. Nose tackle is almost certainly one of them. And I think with Will Smith has been a really solid player. He's been a role player for Ohio State for a number of years. When he's been out there, it hasn't been the opposing team is just playing find the fish and just going right at him. And he has absolutely been holding his own. He has not been a Caden McDonald level player, but he's been perfectly solid. And I would expect him to be perfectly solid again this year, but not a Caden McDonald level player. John Walker, he was really good at UCF. He wasn't Caden McDonald. And he's someone who we saw this spring and he was good, but he wasn't, we were talking about one of the transfer
Mhm.
defensive tackles a lot this spring, and that was James Smith. And John Walker was just good. And so, yeah, I think there's unquestionably going to be a step back there. And again, every time I say this, it is you go back to last year's defense, and last year's defense was a historically great defense, like a complete outlier in terms of greatness for the Ohio State defense. You're not going to have that this year. It is not going to be as good an Ohio State defense as it was last year, just because that was maybe the best Ohio State defense in 50 years. I mean, going back to the 1973 defense where they're giving up
Mm.
5 points a game or whatever it was. You don't have that every year, and you're probably not going to have that this year. This is an area where there's going to be a step back, but I don't think it's an enormous step back. If they didn't bring in John Walker and it was just Will Smith and you're just sort of hoping you've got someone else there, that would be one thing. I think they've kind of addressed the concern. It's not going to be as good, but it should be okay.
It's okay to not be as good when you lose a Caden McDonald, and they have veterans, so that's one thing. Do they have enough veterans, Tom? And that's my next concern because the depth overall at defensive tackle, overall, both spots there. And frankly, they're going to play probably three defensive tackles at times in their penny front with the 5-man front, perhaps. You've got, you've got Eddrick Houston and James Smith and John Walker and Will Smith, and you could throw Jason Moore in there. Those are your five veterans. Outside of that, you've got three true freshmen that we saw some this spring, and there were some good moments, but I think they want more than just five. And if they can't get more than just five, I think that changes some of their plans. And frankly, that's assuming Jason Moore gives them more than he did last year. They're waiting on him and they're trying to push him forward. And I'm not even sure, trying to be kind, how much you can count on from him. And can he keep a freshman from pushing past him? I think, well, I'll leave this up to you, Tom. Is it better or worse if a freshman passes Jason Moore this year, as we talk about the concerns about the depth?
I think it's better if you have a true freshman get there. I don't know that I'm expecting a true freshman to get there, at least in the first half of the year. That's just interior of the defensive line is a very tough place to be physically ready to contribute as a true freshman. I think Kayden McDonald did a little bit, like very situationally, but then that was someone who turned into a first round pick. That's really kind of an outlier. If you get someone who is ready to contribute, even just 5-10 snaps a game this year by Halloween, and then you get that in the back half of the season, that would be a huge benefit to them. But I don't think you can ever bank on that out of a true freshman. So then the question is, what do you have with Jason Moore? And the answer is deep breath. You've got a guy who has been about good enough to play. I think he's not getting blown off the ball when he's out there, but he's also not someone who has really earned any kind of a regular spot. And every year when we talk to the coaching staff, it's kind of like, well, boy, this is a big spring for Jason Moore. And can he take on a bigger role? And we kind of keep waiting for this to be the year and this to be the year. And it hasn't ever quite been the year. He is a little bit like, there's the baseball concept of wins above replacement. And you kind of have a guy you can put him out there and it's like, it's okay. It's not great. It's maybe not even like average for your level, but it's like, it's okay. And that's kind of been what they've gotten out of him, where it's like, you can put him out there and it's okay, but it's not okay plus or good or whatever. And that doesn't mean it can't happen this year. It just means it hasn't happened yet. And he has stayed at Ohio State. I think if they didn't want him back, they could have said like, yeah, why don't you go pursue another school. They brought him back. The talent is in there. You have sort of seen flashes of it over the years. It just hasn't consistently shown up. They don't need that much out of him. They have kind of the pair and a spare. He just needs to be the spare. That's what they need out of him. Because if you don't have 4 guys you're comfortable with in the interior of the defensive line, that's a real concern. If you've got 4 and maybe you got another guy and then maybe you can find someone else out of the freshmen, that's not a concern. That feels like that's probably like kind of a typical situation for most teams, where most teams are not going 6 deep on the interior of the defensive line and going like, we feel great about these 6 guys. It's, you got 4 guys and then you've got some question marks and you've got some potential, but you don't have like firm answers. That kind of feels like where things are for Ohio State right now.
Well, and last year, 4 defensive tackles played mainly. Will Smith Jr. was the fourth in snaps. He played 223 snaps, which was exactly half of what Kayden McDonald played. So Eddrick Houston and Tywan Malone were in between there. And then you go from Will Smith at 223 to Jarquez Carter at 51. He was the 5th guy. And so can they do that again? Well, you need somebody to be have as much impact and as much wind as Kayden McDonald. I don't think they want any of their nose tackles playing 55 snaps like Kayden McDonald did against Miami, or 51 like he did against Indiana. They didn't have anybody else. And Will Smith Jr. only played 13 snaps total in those 2 games, to give you an idea. Now, Jason Moore, I think, was hurt over the first 5 games or so last year. He was slowed by that. But Jarquez Carter had played more snaps than he did, but once Moore was healthy, then he was back above Carter. And he's a guy that you mentioned they could have told him to go away. And actually, I don't know that they could have, because they lost Jarquez Carter, Trajan Odom, the other tackle in that class, and Eric Mensah. So it's like, you don't want to lose 5 guys to the transfer portal. So you bring him back and maybe he can be the 5th guy. And if not, you've proven that you could kind of get by without a 5th guy, but maybe a freshman can sneak in there as well. My last concern is about Eddrick Houston. And is he we're waiting for him. And the freshman year, it's like, well, he was slowed because he moved from defensive end to defensive tackle, and that takes time. Last year he plays and loses his job, but he started and he was hurt, got injured, came back and 21 tackles on the season, 4 tackles for loss, 3 sacks. But, he said himself he wasn't quite comfortable, wasn't quite healthy. This year as a junior, says he's comfortable, says he's healthy. We need to see it. It's time to put it on the field and put it in terms of production, because at this point, he is the production that they're getting out of him is a little bit like, or that they got out of him last year, a little bit like Teron Vincent his last 2 years. And that's something that they need more than that this year, unless James Smith is just kind of otherworldly. But I think they need Eddrick Houston to take that next step and be a disruptive guy. We saw a little bit of it in the postseason, but just continue to be a guy that is a problem and, frankly, that has a decision to make after this season.
And this is, I think, a very fair concern. However, I think there's a lot of reasons that I don't view this as something where I have like big doubts this is going to happen. I expect Eddrick Houston to take that next step, because you've seen, he came in year one, true freshman. He has the recruiting profile, that 5-star recruiting profile, which is always sort of a good marker. It doesn't count for anything once you show up in college, but it's at least a good marker that, hey, there's some real explosive talent here that could turn into something. And then you saw him, he came in his freshman year, they sorted him on the edge, and then all of a sudden, like, boom, midway through the year, he's actually playing reps at 3-tech. He was not coming in as a 3-tech, and then boom, he's playing at a position on the interior of the defensive line, which, I mentioned earlier, like, that is not an easy spot to come in as a true freshman, and he's playing in there. So that's another good marker for him. And then you look at last year and it's like, why didn't he take a big step? Well, he hurt his knee the first practice of fall camp. And so you missed fall camp, and he wasn't 100% all the way through the season. It really was not anywhere close to 100%, I think, into October or so last year. And so, yeah, that's going to leave you a little behind the 8 ball. You would expect to take that big next step between your first year and the second year. Well, you miss fall camp. You're not 100% for most of the season. Yeah, that's going to be your knee is a very important part of your get off as a defensive tackle. If you're not feeling quite right there, that's going to impact things. So, as you said, he did improve throughout the year. I think as that knee was getting healthier and he was getting more comfortable and back into the swing of things, I'm expecting him to take a noticeable step forward this year. This is one where I think there's lots of reasons to sort of look at last year and go, there's a why behind the stuff that didn't happen last year. And there's a lot of why behind why you're expecting those steps to be taken this year. And I am all the way in the bag for James Smith in terms of what I think he could be this year, where I don't think this is not Eddrick Houston has to turn into a dominant 60 snaps a game guy for them. If he does, great, wonderful. But I don't think, because you brought in James Smith and because of what we have seen and heard about James Smith so far this year, I don't think you need Eddrick Houston to do that. If Eddrick Houston turns into someone who has a first-round NFL draft grade, like, wonderful. That's a great outcome for Ohio State. I don't think you have to have that, because I think between he and James Smith, you're going to have one of those guys who turns into that kind of player for them. It just feels like, yes, this is a legitimate question, but I think there's also a legitimate answer to it.
There should be. I mean, there's plenty of reason to think there will be. Last year against Miami, 5 tackles, season high 5 tackles. I'm going to assume that as a career high 5 tackles, 1.5 sacks against Carson Beck and the Canes. And maybe, who knows, maybe one of those sacks was against Malachi Toney. I forget. But as Malachi Toney plays everywhere, as we know. So what are your concerns? If you've got some out there, did I miss some? Are my concerns overblown? Is Tom whitewashing my concerns to make himself feel better about whatever? Who knows? Let us know your thoughts. 5-star rating review on the audio side. Thumbs up on this one would be great. Subscribe to the channel if you've not yet done so. Hit the bell to be notified. And, of course, continue to find us over at BuckeyeInsiders.com. That will do it from here. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you all later.